Hi guys, I hope you all are having a good day today. It's Wednesday, that means we're closer to Friday, and woo, we can all use a Friday. So a couple weeks ago, I said on my Facebook that I would be putting out a video, kind of just documenting my experience with COVID and anxiety and faith and everything that I went through over the past few months. And I'm going to try to keep this as brief as possible because it is a very long story. Don't mind my appearance, okay? I work from home and I just didn't feel like getting ready today. I'm chilling in my robe. So, but I'm going to try to keep this as brief as possible. Anytime that I tried to make one of these videos combining everything, it ended up being way too long. And this video will probably be way too long. But I'm going to talk today about what I experienced with anxiety and with panic. Hoping that some of you that might be experiencing something similar will get some hope from my experience, or maybe get some tips and tricks from my experience to kind of start your own healing journey and to help you guys out. And so whatever you take from this video, I hope it's nothing but good things, and I hope that some of you who are experiencing something similar can look at my story and say, hey, if she can make it through that, then I can make it through what I'm dealing with. So I'll make other videos discussing what we experienced with COVID and with everything that I've learned through my faith throughout this process at another time. But I think this is important. I know a lot of you that I've talked to are experiencing a heightened anxiety and a heightened panic. So anyway, long story short, I hope this hearing about my experience helps you. So about a month ago, when my husband was in the hospital with COVID, I was at my parents' house. And I was staying with them with my dogs so that I wasn't alone, and so that they could help me, with my dogs and just with everyday tasks like cooking and things like that, just to kind of relax while my hubby was in the hospital. The first thing that I noticed that was happening to me was I was just overcome with these intrusive thoughts. That my husband was going to die, that I was going to die, my family, my friends, they were all going to die. And these were very intrusive thoughts with visuals, not like hallucinations, but in my mind, like I was envisioning all these funerals and just everyone I know and love dying, which was pretty traumatic. But I didn't really tell anyone that I was experiencing this. And the second thing that I noticed was that I was so overcome with sadness and grief of all of these things happening that I couldn't eat. Like I physically could not eat anything. And my dad had made me this delicious chicken soup, and I couldn't even eat that. So I had been there for a few days, and I believe it was Sunday came along, and I woke up. I had gotten some sleep, and I had woken up with this heavy, heavy, heavy pressure in my chest. And I had convinced myself, now again, not telling anyone what I was feeling, I had convinced myself, and I started getting really short of breath, like that I couldn't catch my breath. So that's where my trusty dusty friend, this evil little monitor thing, came in, and I would start checking my oxygen to make sure that it wasn't dropping. Now, I had just recovered from COVID. I wasn't contagious. Like, COVID didn't even affect me bad or affect my lungs, but I was convinced that this was it. My oxygen was dropping and I was dying. And not only that, but that I had just infected my entire family with COVID, and now they were going to die too. So it was this endless cycle. So I went out into my kitchen, or my parents' kitchen where they were, and I looked at my mom and I said, Mom, something's not right. I think I need to go to Med Express. And then as soon as I said that to her, my breathing became even more difficult. Like I couldn't take a deep breath. And then all of a sudden I started getting tunnel vision, and I told my mom, I said, you need to call 911. We can't go to Med Express, call 911, because then at this point my arms and my hands started going numb, and my hands curled in like this, like I was like almost like I was like having a stroke, and I couldn't move my fingers. And then my face started going numb. So at this point, I'm like, I'm having a stroke. Like, this is it. So the paramedics on the phone told my mom to get me to a safe spot. So she sat me down on the couch and she talked me through it. Paramedics came. They gave me a paper bag. And at this point, my resting heart rate was in the 180s. My blood pressure was through the roof, which is very abnormal for me. And they gave me a paper bag and said that if I did not breathe into the paper bag, I would pass out. I've never passed out in my life, so that scared me too. But I breathed into the paper bag. And as soon as I started breathing into the paper bag, I was little by little able to move my hands, and my heart rate started coming down and my blood pressure started coming down. So they took me to the hospital. In the hospital, I had an atrocious wait, which is a story for another time, but I was taken by ambulance. And eventually when they saw me, I demanded that they checked me, like demanded that they check me for pulmonary embolisms, that they check me for COVID pneumonia, that they check me for a heart attack, all of this stuff. They ended up checking me for everything. Everything came back fine. The CT scan of my lungs did not show anything, but there were parts of my lungs that they couldn't see. So while I was in the hospital, they're like, this was a panic attack. They gave me 1 milligram of Ativan while I was in there, and then they sent me home with a drug called hydroxyzine, which they said would help with panic attacks. So I got sent back to my parents' house. The next day, I slept good that night. The next day, I was taking the hydroxyzine as prescribed, and it just made me really, really, really tired. So then a few days passed, and I followed up with a PCP because they wanted to do another CT scan just to see the parts of my lungs that they couldn't see. But they were like, you definitely don't have blood clots, but we'll do this just to make sure. So that same day, I was picking my husband up from the hospital. So I get him, it's all happy. Like, I'm super, super happy that he's okay and coming home. And so I stopped at Walmart on the way home. And as I was in Walmart, I started getting the really bad tunnel vision. I could feel my heart rate increasing, and I was literally about to pass out right in the middle of Walmart. So I just hightailed it out of there and got in my car, drove me and my husband back to my house. And then that night, I took another hydroxyzine because I was like, okay, this is a panic attack again. Took another hydroxyzine. Didn't help at all. Like, did not help whatsoever. When I went to bed, I woke up the next morning and I was still in a state of complete and utter, like, disarray. Like, my heart rate was in the 180s again. I was feeling really faint. I was feeling like I was going to pass out. I was feeling like I couldn't breathe. So I told my husband, I said, something's wrong. Like, I called the ambulance. So when the ambulance came, my heart rate was and my blood pressure were through the roof. They took me back to UPMC East. And on the way there, they checked my blood sugar. And my blood sugar, they were like, you're pre-diabetic, blah, blah, blah. Which I'm like, oh my God, like, what is happening to me? So I went back to the hospital. They checked me for everything again, did an EKG on my heart, like, everything was fine. But this time when I was in the hospital, they were giving me Ativan through an IV, or through injections. So they ended up admitting me overnight so that they could do a heart monitor overnight and make sure I didn't have any arrhythmias. So I don't really remember much from my hospital stay there, because they had me like every 6 hours. Now that I looked back on my records, every 6 hours they were giving me Ativan and more hydroxyzine. So I don't remember much from my stay there. I just remember the next morning, the cardiologist came in and said, you have a good heart. That's a good thing. This is all anxiety related. So then they sent me home with a small prescription of Ativan. I went home and I was feeling totally fine, totally normal. My husband and I went to Walmart to get a Christmas gift and to just, get out of the house. That night, I took another Ativan because I'm like, this feels great. And then I slept fine. And then the next day, I kind of came to my senses a little bit because I was out of that Ativan fog. And I'm like, wait a minute, like, I can't keep taking these around the clock. This is bad, so I'm not going to take it. So I didn't take it. And then all of a sudden, literally all holy hell broke loose once it was like kind of out of my system. I'm talking like the rapid heart rates, can't breathe, the worst intrusive thoughts that you could ever imagine. Fear, terror, uncomfortable body aches, like just pressure in my chest. Every breath I took hurt. And this continued on and got worse over the course of the next few weeks. Not only was I experiencing the physical symptoms of anxiety, such as the rapid heart rates, the sweaty palms, chest pain, chest pressure, can't take a deep breath, feeling like you can't breathe, feeling faint, feeling like you were going to pass out, tunnel vision, seeing stars, every physical symptom that you could have of panic and anxiety I had, headaches. And this was 24/7 with no break for like 3 weeks. Not only was I experiencing the physical symptoms, but I developed phobias of everything around me. And for any of you that know me, you know that, first of all, I'm a Leo. So I have an aggressive side by nature, no bullshit side by nature. But second of all, I have never been afraid of anything in my life. Like, I run towards things that are supposed to scare people. Okay. I've never been afraid of anyone or anything in my whole entire life. But I developed phobias of everything. And when I say everything, I literally mean everything. I was afraid of showering. I was afraid of eating. I was afraid of drinking anything but water. I lost so much weight that I was down to a weight that I was at 8 years ago when my husband and I started dating, which was like in the teens, like under 120 pounds, which before that I was at 145. So eating, drinking, showering. I was afraid of my dogs. I was afraid of my husband. I was afraid of my family. I was afraid of my friends. I was afraid of driving. I was afraid of going to the store. I was afraid of medicine. I was afraid of watching TV. I was afraid of listening to music. I was afraid of sleeping. Now, when I say I was afraid, like, literally anything that once brought me joy or happiness or peace or comfort, it was almost as if there was a physical barrier that would not allow me near these things. Like, my dogs, like, I didn't even want to be near them. Like, they terrified me and they disgusted me at one point. And it's so awful because dogs are literally like my favorite things in the entire world. They're my favorite presences to be around. My husband, I was afraid of him. I was afraid of myself. So I would purposefully, and this is pretty much everything in my life. So imagine being afraid of everything, but it's around you all the time. Like, this was 24/7. Like, I was just in a constant state of terror, of fear, of panic. I couldn't sleep because I was afraid to sleep. And by afraid to sleep, I mean, like, I was afraid that I would forget to know how to breathe. So I would sit there as I was trying to sleep with an oxygen monitor on and stare at it. And when I would feel my body relaxing, literally my heart rate coming down to a normal resting heart rate, my body would literally jolt with adrenaline and not allow me to sleep. So everything other than water, like drinking water, because I knew I had to stay hydrated. And then when I got to the point where I would starve myself so much that if I did not put something in my body, like, I knew that my blood sugar was all messed up, and I knew that if I did not put something in my body, I was literally going to pass out. I would be able to eat a piece of watermelon. So, all at the same time, I had been trying to contact psychiatrists, psychologists, counselors, doctors, anyone who would see me, because I convinced myself that this was me now permanently, and that the old, carefree, strong, happy, loving, and peaceful person that I was convinced that part of me was gone forever. And that in itself terrified me, because I knew that if I kept going at the pace that I was not going to be here much longer, because nobody can physically live in the state that I was in for long. So I had been going back and forth. Like, I made another doctor's appointment, and I finally got in with a counselor. And all of the techniques that I was trying to rid myself of these feelings, physical and mental, none of them were working. None of the breathing techniques were working. The meditations weren't working. The relaxation techniques like tapping or anything that I tried, breathing into a paper bag was no longer working. Like nothing was working, and I was getting no relief. And I just remember I would go back and forth to my parents' house because at one point being in my own home terrified me so bad that I couldn't be here, even on work night. So my parents would have to come pick me up and take me to their house, and I would have to lay at their kitchen table and just cry and just beg them to help me. And then, eventually my husband became the person that I would cry to, and there was still a little part of me mentally that knew that like the old me was still there kind of, and that old me would just look at my husband and just beg him to help me and beg God to help me and to relieve me of the burden that I was feeling. So all of the spiritual work that I did aside to heal, which I will talk about at another point, which is very important and very profound in my story, speaking strictly from a human standpoint, this is what we ended up doing, or what I ended up doing, because there came a point where I had been wailing so much and crying so much and screaming so much, and I was so run down that I couldn't even work. I thought I was going to lose my job and my house and my new house. I mean, this was bad, guys. Like, this was not just a normal bout of anxiety. Like, I was diagnosed with PTSD and a panic disorder. Okay. And basically what a panic disorder is a fear of panic. And so when you start having this fear of panic, you start avoiding things that will trigger a panic attack. You avoid your triggers. But for me, that was literally everything. Like everything in my life, every little thing aside from air. Okay. I can't avoid everything. So this was really starting to snowball into a legitimate, like, brain injury, mental bad. Like, I considered many times, and I looked up many mental health facilities to check myself into inpatient. The only reason why I didn't was because my mom and my husband somehow, some way, convinced me not to. Don't know how, but I'm glad that they did. And there's nothing wrong if you do go that route. But I knew that me, who I am at my core, would not benefit from that. So what we ended up doing, we ended up finding a doctor. Well, my husband ended up finding a doctor, a video of a doctor. His name's like Harry Berry or Harry Carey. I don't know who he is, but he has this video talking about panic disorders and talking about what they are. And I did sign myself up for counseling, by the way. But anyway, talking about what they are. And one of the things that he said was a lot of people try to treat this, a lot of doctors try to treat this disorder with medication, but it does not need to be treated with medication. And it is not only not necessary to be medicated for this disorder, but it's one of the easiest mental health issues to completely heal and to completely treat. He has a method with cognitive behavioral therapy that he has this idea, and he has successfully treated many patients within 2 sessions, okay? And never to report a panic attack again after these sessions. I mean, huge. So his method is to basically just throw yourself at these fears and to throw yourself into these situations that are inducing panic. So instead of avoiding your triggers, you just run head on to them, okay? And you face them. So at first when I listen to this, I'm like, this is completely ridiculous. Like, no, I'm not going to do this. Like, completely shut off. But then I got to a point where I was like, you know what? I have no other choice, because this is literally everything in my life, down to my dogs, that are inducing panic attacks, and I cannot avoid this. So with my husband's help, we started doing little experiments. And the first day that we did experiments, it was at nighttime. It was at my parents' house, and I forced myself no matter how uncomfortable I was, to sing, which singing, as all of you know, is my passion. But I was afraid to do it because I was like, I don't even have enough breath to like stay conscious in my resting hours. How am I going to sing? But I was like, you know what, Joe Russell, go get your guitar. Even if it sounds like shit, like I'm just going to sing and I'm going to see how I feel, just to remind myself at my core of who I am and what I do and what I've done and what I've been successful at. So, he got his guitar. We sang a few songs. And at this point, I was still taking medicine. I wasn't taking the Ativan. I wasn't taking the hydroxyzine. I wasn't taking the sleep aid that they gave me, which at this point, I can't even remember. Oh, trazodone. Wasn't taking the trazodone. Wasn't taking the Zoloft. I was taking a low dose of Celexa. Okay, at this point, it had been 2 weeks. So I sang. After I sang, I didn't feel as spacey. I didn't feel as out of body, because the out of body experience that I was feeling at all hours of the day was probably the worst feeling ever. But it went away a little bit. And then I noticed that even though I had like a high heart rate, like it wasn't bad because like I had been singing, like that's normal. So that night I went home. I got a little bit of sleep because at this point I was not sleeping at all, but I got a little bit of sleep. I'm talking like maybe 2 hours of solid sleep. And then the next morning I woke up and like it was like bad. Like I was crying, not even crying, just screaming uncontrollably and like having these chest convulsions for like 3.5 hours. So at that point, I had come out into my living room and I just started singing again. And I was singing this time my praise and worship music, which I was not able to listen to for weeks because it scared me. But I just made myself do it no matter how uncomfortable it made me for whatever reason. I don't know why it made me uncomfortable, but I just sang for a while, like as loud as I could. And this was at like 9 o'clock in the morning. My husband was here. He was in tears because he had never seen me go through something like this. And then after I was done, like when I knew that I had figured out all of these spiritual reasons, I felt better, a little bit better. And so throughout the day, I would start feeling panicky and I would just force myself to sing and just remind myself of who I was. Sorry. So then, once I started singing, after I was done with my worship music, I'm like, I'm going to listen to some Alanis because her music always makes me feel better. So I was in my kitchen, I blasted it, took myself back to her concert and how excited I felt and how alive I felt and how just fearless I felt. And as I allowed myself to feel those things, I noticed that uncontrollably, instead of crying and convulsing, I started dancing. And once I started dancing, I'm like, this is great. Like, I'm just going to allow myself to be in this moment for right now. And whatever panic I have to deal with later, I'll deal with it later. But for now, I'm going to be just like I'm on stage with Alanis. And it was great. I know this sounds crazy. But then, so after that, I was like, okay, like I feel good. I still feel panicky, but you know what? I'm going to do some experiments. So with my husband's help, we went to visit my in-laws, which was wonderful. So we visited my mother and my father-in-law, and my husband's twin was home, and it was so good to see them after not seeing them for so long. And then after that, I was like, I'm not panicking at their house like I thought I would. And even if I would, like, they would just be there to love me. I was like, let's go see your other sister. So we went to my other sister-in-law's house. We saw Brandon's nieces and nephews. I didn't panic at their house, and it was great. But at this time, like I was feeling really good, but then it started getting dark. And I noticed that when it got dark, that was like a trigger for me for some reason. It started getting dark. And though I wasn't in full panic attack mode, I noticed that I was starting to get the symptoms. So I'm like, you know what, babe, like, let's go home. I'm going to sing. And we invited 2 of our best friends over the house, for another experiment. So they came over. I just let my body do what it needed to do. If I had to cry, I cried. If I had to panic, I panicked. They really saw me going through a little bit of what I was experiencing, and knowing that they were here and that they weren't going to judge me and that I was still going to be okay, even if people saw what I was dealing with, really helped. And that night, after all of these experiments and trying to induce these panic attacks and just letting it happen, that night I got a really good night's sleep. So then over the course of the next few days, with my husband's help, again, we did these little experiments. So if I was afraid to drive, which I was afraid to drive, I sat in my driver's seat. I intentionally tried to induce a panic attack. I would mentally tell myself, okay, let's go. Just get it over with already because I'm ready to move on. Like, I can't feel this way anymore. Or going into Walmart, I would start to feel myself have a panic attack. So what I would do, we would just stand there and let it happen. And then something incredible happened. I noticed that when I would start feeling myself having a panic attack, if I just allowed myself to feel it and didn't try to fight it, it went away. Like, genuinely went away, stopped. And we did this in different scenarios, intentionally tried to bring it on. And when it came on, just allowing it to happen and not trying to fight it. It worked. So when I say that it worked, I mean, it completely took the panic and the panic disorder and the fear of panicking out of my body and out of my brain. Because what actually happens when you're panicking, your body will release hormones. You're in a fight or flight mode. So it's almost like, you're in the ocean and a shark is next to you. A great white shark is next to you. So you are, of course, going to swim as fast as you can away from that shark. Panic disorder tells you that there's a shark in the water when there's not a shark in the water, and it's actually, there's nothing there. But your brain still releases those fight or flight hormones, which is adrenaline, and then lovely, lovely cortisol, which is the stress hormone. So adrenaline gets your heart beating fast. That's when you feel these physical symptoms of, oh my God, I'm having a heart attack, I'm going to die. That's adrenaline. That's an adrenaline rush, and it's totally normal, and it's there to protect you. It's there to help you when you are in these dangerous situations. The cortisol comes in. It's the stress hormone, and it is released to prevent your bodily functions and your bodily your bodily responses from getting in the way of that fight or flight. It is a stress hormone. So what ends up happening when you have a panic attack, and doctors, psychiatrists, if you're listening, please correct me if I'm wrong, but this is what I was told and this is what I've found. When you were having that panic response with the adrenaline, and you start panicking because of what you're feeling, that stress hormone gets released, and it ultimately keeps you in that state because it's telling your body that it's time to panic, it's time to fight or flight, and it starts shutting down, like I said, these bodily functions so that you could go through that fight or flight. But when you try to fight that, and when you tell your body that there is something to be afraid of, your body starts releasing more of that cortisol. It starts releasing more adrenaline because you're telling yourself that there is a legitimate threat, that there's a legitimate fear. Once you roll out any medical issues and you start looking at panic attacks and panic disorders for what they are, and you start just allowing your body to do what it needs to do, it goes away so quickly, so quick. Because then your body, like, if you just allow yourself to feel that adrenaline rush and know that it's not going to hurt you, it's just a rush of hormones, your body won't release that cortisol, okay? It won't release that stress hormone that makes these panic attacks last so much longer. And your body will say, and your brain will say, hey, there's actually not a threat here. And then it stops releasing adrenaline. It stops releasing the cortisol. And therefore, it stops the feelings of the panic attacks. So this is what has worked for me. I am not a doctor, and what works for me might not work for you. Now, the other hurdle I had was the Celexa I was taking. I stopped taking it under the guidance of my doctor. I told them what dose I was taking. They said it's not even a therapeutic dose. You can just stop taking it and not experience withdrawal. So I did, because I was like, this is potentially, and it can make things much worse. And now that I've been off of it for almost a week, I can tell you with 100% certainty that even the lowest dose that I was on was making my anxiety and my panic worse, because it did make me feel spacey. It did make me feel out of body. And those feelings are associated with panic attacks and panic disorders. I feel completely 100% normal now. And this healing, this journey is not over. I know I'm going to have setbacks. But I am no longer afraid of having a panic attack. And because I'm no longer afraid of having a panic attack, I can now go out and not avoid these triggers, such as driving or being out in public or being around my family or being around my friends or watching TV or listening to music or working or anything that my anxiety told me was bad for me. I can now enjoy those things. And now, because I can enjoy those things, now my brain is releasing these happy hormones. It's releasing excitement hormones, joy, dopamine, serotonin, melatonin to sleep. I mean, all of these hormones that I need to heal my brain and to heal my trauma, actually heal it, are there now. I can feel them now because I'm not so afraid of having a panic attack. So what I would encourage you guys to do that are experiencing this, take yourself and really give yourself patience, really love yourself, give yourself grace, show yourself the same love and grace that God shows you or that Jesus would show you. Look at the situation from an outsider's point of view and really listen to your mind and your body when you are experiencing this panic. Allow your mind and body to tell you what you need, because your mind and body will never fail you. Your intuition will not fail you. And your intuition, by the way, and your gifts and your mind, your body, and spirit will never, ever, ever be the one to tell you that you're going to die, or that your mom or your dad or your husband or your friends or your family are going to die. That's not your intuition. That is anxiety. That is fear. And that has no place in your life, okay? Has no place in your spirit. It does not belong with you. It is not a part of you. It is not a part of your natural energetic field. We are light beings. We come from light, and that is where we thrive. So if you have a panic attack or if you're feeling anxious, feel it, scream, cry if you need to. Just know that you are safe. You are protected. Allow your body to feel these physical sensations. Let it pass, and then put it on the shelf and move on with your day and fill yourself up with love and happiness. Allow your brain to recognize the dopamine and the serotonin and the good feelings. I don't care what you have to do. I don't care if it's something as stupid as, like I said in my post the other day, lighting your favorite candle if you can smell, or eating your favorite snack, or just whatever it is. Make sure to be replenishing yourself and be kind to yourself during this time. And I promise you, things will get better. I promise if you are experiencing anything similar to what I experienced, it's not permanent, okay? But you have to be willing to do the hard work. You have to be willing to be in uncomfortable situations, and you have to allow yourself to feel these things. I suggest with a trusted person, like if you are doing something like driving or going to the store or leaving your house, have somebody that you love and trust with you. That way, in case you do pass out or if something does happen physically like that, they could be there to make sure you don't get hurt. But there is nothing to be afraid of, okay? So I know this is a long video, and I definitely know that I did not touch on everything and every method that I did try. But the biggest takeaway is, like I said, try the method of intentionally facing your fears. Tell your brain to bring it on, okay? And also by doing that, real quick, if I tell you right now to not envision a purple elephant on top of my head, you're automatically going to envision a purple elephant on my head. You can't stop it. We naturally do things that we are told not to do. with that logic, if you go into the store that you are anxious about and you stand there and you say, okay, brain, let's go, bring on the panic attack, more than likely your brain is going to do the exact opposite of what you tell it to do. Okay? So that's a little trick as well. And again, I know that I haven't touched on every little trick that I've tried. I hope that if you have made it this far in my video that you take something from it. I will have more videos in the future. If you have any questions or if you want to know the other tips and tricks that I've done in more detail, feel free to message me. If you are experiencing any kind of panic or anxiety, I will be there to listen to you and to talk it out with you, to distract you, to give you, any piece of information that I can, because I don't want anyone that I know ever feeling an ounce of what I felt, because it was petrifying and pure terror and the complete absence of light. So feel free, even if I don't know you and I've never met you in my life, to reach out if you have any questions or if you just need someone to listen. I will be that person for you. And I hope you all, like I said, took something, and maybe this talk, I don't know, maybe you haven't even listened this far, and I hope that by listening to what I experienced, that it gives you some hope. And again, just know that this is not permanent for you, and you will make it through, and there are brighter days ahead. I promise you, with every fiber of my being, I promise you it gets better every single day. So that's all I'm going to say today, because by now, most of you probably haven't listened this far. But if you have, kudos. I love you all, and I hope that you guys continue to heal and that you continue on this incredible journey, because you are important and you are loved. Okay? All right. We'll talk to you later.